Imagine waking up one morning, going to check your life savings, the money you worked 30 years to build, the retirement fund you sacrificed vacations for, the college fund you set aside for your children, and it is completely gone. Not stolen by a masked man with a gun, not taken in a violent robbery, but quietly, invisibly, systematically drained by a man in a tailored suit, sitting in a glass office on the 40th floor of a Manhattan skyscraper, sipping his morning coffee while signing papers that made your money disappear. This is not fiction. This happened to thousands of real people when Bernie Madoff ran the largest Ponzi scheme in American history, a $65 billion fraud that ruined lives, destroyed families, and sent shockwaves through the entire global financial system. And here is the most disturbing part. For decades, nobody noticed, nobody stopped it, because white-collar crime is the most dangerous, most costly, and most misunderstood form of crime in the entire world. And today, we are going to understand it completely. The term white-collar crime was first introduced to the world in 1939 by an American sociologist named Edwin Sutherland, and when he introduced it, he did something truly revolutionary. He challenged everything that criminology had believed up until that point. Before Sutherland, criminology, the scientific study of crime and criminal behavior, was almost entirely focused on the poor. Scholars and researchers assumed that crime came from poverty, from broken homes, from a lack of education, from the lower classes of society. But Sutherland stood up at the American Sociological Society and said something that made the room go silent. Crime is not just something that happens in dark alleyways. Crime is also committed by people of high social status, high respectability, and high trust. People who commit these offenses in the course of their professional occupations. He called this phenomenon white-collar crime, named after the white dress shirts that business professionals wore, as opposed to the blue collars of factory and manual workers. Sutherland's definition was elegant in its simplicity, a crime committed by a person of respectability and high social status in the course of their occupation. Think about what this means. It means the accountant who falsifies financial records, the pharmaceutical executive who knowingly hides dangerous drug side effects from the public, the mortgage broker who forges loan documents to earn a higher commission, the corporate executive who dumps toxic chemicals into a river because cleaning them up properly would cost too much money. These are all white-collar crimes, crimes that do not involve violence, do not involve weapons, and are not committed on street corners, but rather behind locked office doors, inside computer systems, and through the signature of a pen on paper. Now, one of the most fascinating questions in criminology is this: why do people who already have money, power, and success choose to commit crimes? They do not need to steal to eat. They are not desperate. They are not impoverished. So what drives them? Criminologists have developed several powerful theories to explain this. The first and most important is Sutherland's own theory of differential association, which argues that criminal behavior is learned, just like any other behavior, through social interaction. A young stockbroker joins a firm where his senior colleagues manipulate stock prices. Everyone does it. Everyone profits from it. It is treated as normal, even smart. Over time, through exposure and mentorship, the young broker learns not just the techniques of the crime, but also the rationalizations, the mental justifications that make the behavior feel acceptable. Everyone does it. It doesn't really hurt anyone. The system is rigged anyway. We're just playing the game. These rationalizations are what criminologists call neutralization techniques, a concept developed by Gresham Sykes and David Matza, and they are absolutely central to understanding white-collar crime. White-collar criminals rarely see themselves as criminals. They see themselves as clever, as winners, as people who understand how the world really works. The second major theory is Robert Merton's strain theory, which argues that in a society that glorifies financial success above all else, as American culture does, individuals who feel they cannot achieve that success through legitimate means will turn to illegitimate means. For white-collar criminals, the strain is not poverty, it is ambition. It is the pressure to hit quarterly earnings targets. It is the fear of falling behind competitors. It is the desperate need to maintain a lifestyle, a status, an image. Think of the Enron scandal. Executives at one of America's most celebrated energy companies manipulated their financial statements not because the company was failing, but because they were terrified of appearing to fail. The gap between the reality of their performance and the image they needed to project became so unbearable that fraud was their solution. A third important framework is control theory, developed by Travis Hershey, which asks not why do people commit crimes, but rather why do most people not commit crimes? The answer, Hershey argued, is social bonds, attachment to family, commitment to career, involvement in community, and belief in the rules. When these bonds are weak, when a person feels anonymous within a massive corporation, when they feel no personal accountability to shareholders they never meet or employees they never see, those controls dissolve and the temptation to commit crime grows exponentially. This is why corporate culture matters so much in white-collar crime. A culture of greed, secrecy, and results at any cost actively weakens the social bonds that keep people honest. White-collar crime is not simply a single act. It is an entire universe of behaviors, and understanding its categories is essential to understanding its true scope. The first major category is corporate fraud, which involves deliberate deception in financial reporting and business operations. The most notorious example remains Enron Corporation, which used sophisticated accounting tricks called special purpose entities to hide billions of dollars in debt off their balance sheets, presenting investors and the public with a completely false picture of the company's financial health. When the fraud unraveled in 2001, Enron collapsed overnight. 20,000 employees lost their employment and their pensions, and investors lost billions of dollars. The second category is securities and investment fraud, which includes Ponzi schemes, insider trading, and market manipulation. We have already mentioned Bernie Madoff's $65 billion Ponzi scheme, but consider also the story of insider trading when Martha Stewart, one of America's most famous lifestyle entrepreneurs, was convicted in 2004 for selling shares of a pharmaceutical company based on non-public information she received from her broker. While her case involved relatively modest financial gain, it illustrated perfectly how those with privileged access to information exploit that access for personal profit, fundamentally undermining the fairness of financial markets. The third major category is healthcare fraud, which costs the United States alone an estimated $100 billion every year. This includes doctors billing Medicare for procedures they never performed, pharmaceutical companies illegally marketing drugs for uses they have not been approved for, and medical equipment suppliers billing for devices that patients never received. In 2012, GlaxoSmithKline, one of the world's largest pharmaceutical companies, paid a $3 billion criminal fine, the largest healthcare fraud settlement in American history, for promoting prescription drugs for unapproved uses and for concealing safety data about certain medications. The fourth category is environmental crime, where corporations knowingly violate environmental laws to save money. In 2010, the Deepwater Horizon oil spill killed 11 workers and released nearly 5 million barrels of oil into the Gulf of Mexico. Subsequent investigations revealed that BP had repeatedly ignored safety warnings and cut corners on maintenance. BP eventually paid over $65 billion in cleanup costs, fines, and settlements, but no senior executive served a single day in prison, a fact that continues to fuel debate about justice and accountability in white-collar crime. The fifth category is cybercrime and corporate espionage, which represents the fastest-growing form of white-collar crime in the digital age. This includes hacking into competitor systems to steal trade secrets, financial fraud carried out through digital means, and massive data breaches where millions of people's personal information is stolen and sold. The 2017 Equifax data breach exposed the personal and financial information of 147 million Americans, nearly half the country's population, and was caused in part by the company's failure to apply a known security patch for months. This was not just negligence, it was a corporate decision, a cost-benefit calculation that put profits above the security of people's most sensitive information. Here is where the story becomes deeply important and deeply troubling. White-collar crime causes far more financial damage than all street crime combined. The FBI estimates that white-collar crime costs the United States between $300 billion and $600 billion every year, compared to roughly $16 billion for all property crime combined. And yet, white-collar criminals are prosecuted far less frequently, convicted far less often, and sentenced far less severely than street criminals. Why? The reasons are multiple and interconnected. First, white-collar crime is extraordinarily difficult to detect and investigate. These crimes unfold over months or years, hidden within millions of pages of financial documents, complex corporate structures, and technical transactions that require teams of expert accountants, lawyers, and forensic analysts to unravel. The average street robbery takes seconds to commit and leaves physical evidence. The average corporate fraud takes years to commit and leaves only a paper trail that requires sophisticated expertise to read. Second, white-collar criminals have enormous resources to defend themselves. A person accused of robbery is typically assigned a public defender. A corporate executive accused of fraud hires an entire law firm, delays proceedings for years through legal motions, and often negotiates a settlement that avoids criminal charges entirely. Third, there is what criminologists call elite deviance, the concept that powerful people operate in a social and legal environment that is structurally more forgiving of their crimes. Regulators who oversee industries often come from those same industries and expect to return to them after their government service, a phenomenon known as the revolving door, which creates subtle but powerful incentives not to pursue aggressive enforcement against the very companies and individuals they may one day work for again. The damage white-collar crime inflicts on society goes far beyond money. When people lose their life savings to investment fraud, they lose their dignity, their security, and their trust in institutions. When corporations dump toxic waste illegally, they poison communities, often poor, often minority communities, for generations. When pharmaceutical companies hide dangerous side effects to protect profits, people die. But perhaps the deepest and most lasting damage is to social trust itself. Democracy, markets, healthcare systems, and the rule of law all depend on a basic level of trust between citizens and institutions. Every major white-collar crime scandal, Enron, the 2008 financial crisis, the opioid epidemic, Volkswagen's emissions scandal, chips away at that trust, leaving people more cynical, more disengaged, and less willing to believe that the system can be fair. And when ordinary people see executives walk away with fines while ordinary people go to prison for minor drug offenses, that cynicism is entirely justified. Criminologists and policy experts have proposed several interconnected solutions. Stronger regulatory frameworks with genuinely independent enforcement agencies must be developed and properly funded. Corporate culture must be transformed through genuine accountability structures where boards, executives, and employees are incentivized to report and prevent wrongdoing rather than conceal it. Whistleblower protections must be strengthened so that individuals who have the courage to come forward do not sacrifice their careers and safety to do so. Sentencing reform must ensure that financial crimes that devastate millions of people are treated with the same seriousness as violent crimes. And perhaps most importantly, criminology and legal education must continue to deepen their engagement with white-collar crime so that the next generation of lawyers, regulators, and business leaders understands not just the law, but the psychology, sociology, and structural conditions that allow these crimes to flourish. White-collar crime teaches us something profound and uncomfortable about human nature and about society. It teaches us that crime is not simply a product of poverty or desperation, it is also a product of opportunity, of culture, of ambition unchecked by conscience, and of systems that protect the powerful while punishing the powerless. Edwin Sutherland gave us this concept because he understood that if we only study crime among the poor, we will only ever understand half of the story, and we will only ever fix half of the problem. The real measure of a society's commitment to justice is not how it treats those at the bottom, it is how it treats those at the top when they break the rules. Because when a man with a gun steals $1,000, we call him a criminal. But when a man with a pen steals $1 billion, we often call him a businessman. And that, more than anything else, is what criminology asks us to change. If this video helped you understand something important today, please like, share, and subscribe, because the more people understand these systems, the harder it becomes for those systems to hide. Knowledge is the most powerful form of accountability we have.